In this demo, we're going to cover the area called services requisitioning. Services requisitioning is always more complex than just simply requisitioning materials. Materials, you identify the number, you put it on the cart. With services, you're requisitioning an outcome. So there is always a lot more to do in terms of being able to specify the outcome. And so I'm going to show you some examples, and I'm going to use some examples that are preset because you have to fill out a fair bit of information within the ordering of a service. For the purposes of, you can see that I've linked services agreements into services forms, so I can go into the correct area, and I can go ahead and, for instance, open up a form for ordering an IT service. And so you can see here what we have is the ability to open up the fields. All of our forms are associated with products, and so instead of, in this case, being a form in which the descriptions and everything are filled out, what we have is the ability to open up the product so that we can enter prices, we can enter descriptions and short descriptions and long descriptions, and you can see that we actually have a form associated with the IT consultant, and we even have mechanisms by which we can search and assign a requisition to a particular supplier. So editable price, editable short and long descriptions, editable forms, and even to being able to identify the supplier. So instead of going through the process of filling out the form, I'm going to go through several examples. I'm going to go through an example of a temporary labor request, an SOW, a limit order, and a simple call-off of an rate schedule. So let's go in here, and you can see I've added my services examples as a list. So here, the first one that we're going to look at in detail is a temporary labor request. And I'm going to add this item to the cart. So I'm going to replace the item from the list into the cart, and I'm going to get rid of some of these other. I'm going to go to the cart, and here is my item. So here you can see I'm ordering a temporary labor, and so you can see that I've filled out the description of it. Within the long description, I've filled out a full requirements document. You can see here in this area, I think I've showed you before, but I can be able to fill out the form and it be different depending on what I'm doing with this requisition. But in this case, it's a new requisition, and here's the data that I need to enter in about this thing. I've gone and requested 160 hours of labor at 160 an hour. I'm going to update my cart and send the order out through the checkout process. So here I've actually created a request for contingent labor. I've got the description of the position in the long description, and the order goes out the door. If I've identified the provider, it would go straight out the door after approvals. If it's, I can set it up so that it's configured that it can go to procurement for sourcing. The next example I'm going to show you is the example of a statement of work order. And this is something I do a lot. So what happens is that I work with my customer, and we agree on a written statement of work. And so once we have a statement of work, you always have to send that statement of work to procurement to get a purchase order generated. So here I've got my statement of work on the card. and it says, you know, SOW number 10, it's an upgrade. I'm going to attach the documents, the statement of work document. And so here is the statement of work that I'm attaching to the item. I'm going to close it. And basically now I have a statement of work. And I've got the simple thing. It's a $30,000 statement of work. It's going to be released in percentages. I'm going to go and say I'm going to have 3 milestones. So there's going to be 30, 20, and the 30, 50, and 20. And I'm going to update the cart with that service order. I'm going to, in fact, go in here and assign it to my platform maintenance organization. So I'm going to update my cart and release this order. So what's going out the door now is a simple request for the procurement organization to go ahead and create a purchase order against the attached statement of work. The third type I'm going to talk about is something where we may have almost like a limit order. And in this case here, what we're doing is that we're going to bring up an order to do a function where, you know, in the case of Equinor, for instance, they bring on a Schlumberger onto the platform to go and do some hole inspections where they drop a device down the production drilling hole and they well, and they go ahead and do measurements of the thicknesses of the wall and things like that. So you don't really know what the scope of this necessarily is in terms of cost, but what you do is you create an order that is based on, we think it's going to cost, we're doing a release for, say, $20,000, you know, $50,000. So this is a downhole testing and inspection order, and I'm going to add that to the cart. And when I go to the cart, and I look at the details of this inspection order, you can see that it's a fixed price, $50,000 release, downhole testing per the attached specifications. It's assigned to platform maintenance, and payment will be based on approved timesheets of rates in the agreement. So when we do our service acknowledgement, what the supplier is going to do is that they're going to just report their daily efforts against this order of $50,000 and be able to get paid based on that. So I'm going to go ahead and update my cart. And as always, I'm going to attach the specification. This is going to be a very common process in this type of work. It's a very simple order, and the attachments associated with the order are critical. So here, I'm going to go ahead and proceed to the thing, and I'm going to place that order again. Okay. Now, not everything is so simple as that. We have to realize when we're dealing with large companies like Equinor, they have rate sheets. And here's an example of a rate sheet for somebody like a vendor that does maintenance on a platform here. They've got simple labor services in here, which talk about offshore and onshore rates associated with the engineers. But also, you'll find in here, they have quite obscure rate sheet that is a rate for performing a specific function. So if we go into the services for equipment, you can see here, this is maintenance and overhaul, you know, maintenance on specific pieces of equipment, okay? So rate sheets, then, you're really wanting to do a requisition against the rate sheet. And in the example that I'm going to give you now is that we have simple things where you can requisition, labor services and, perform. The person who's requisitioning says, I want to bring somebody onto the platform for a period of 4 or 5 days to be able to do these inspections. And there's a number of things you have to do to bring them on board. So I'm going to show you an example of this type of rate sheet. So I'm going to, in fact, do this equipment inspection, and I've filled it out, but you're going to be able to see how it works. So in this case, we structure the item into a kit. And if I actually look at this kit, you can see I have identified, when you're bringing somebody on board, you've got to fill out the description and what they're going to do, and they have to fill out an offshore services form. And this is the things that have to happen to bring somebody offshore. But we've simplified it by being able to create in the requisition the things that we're worried about, that we're ordering against. So skill categories, mobilizations, travel and an expense. These are items off the rate sheet that are focused around the simple thing of bringing on some technical services onto the platform, and we can update the things there. But going back to the cart, we can see that we have created an order. And you see that this is the items, and then here are the items on the rate sheet with their compensation for hot bedding, mobilization, etc. And the total order then gets put onto the requisition and we can release it. So that is a case of where we've actually used the kit to be able to identify specific items on the rate sheet that are for this simple type of call off on a service order. And then that goes through. We're going to cover a little bit later how we report against these statements of work, and I call that service delivery acknowledgement. But here I've given you some examples around how we do services requisitioning. We've covered the requisitioning of temporary labor, how we can go and take a statement of work and get a purchase order against it, a limit order for work that is performed where we can't get an accurate estimate of the services because we don't know all of the conditions. And then finally, ordering using a complex rate sheet. In other words, being able to identify items off a rate sheet for a certain type of order. Thank you.